The first time Daenerys Targaryen truly looked at Jon Snow and Robb Stark, standing side by side in her war room, something inside her shifted. The candles flickered against the stone walls of Dragonstone, and the painted table of Westeros lay between them like a battlefield waiting for blood. Tyrion Lannister was speaking again, his voice careful and clever, suggesting alliances and half-measures. Varys stood quiet in the shadows, watching everyone with those little bird eyes of his. But Daenerys was not listening to them. Her eyes were on the two northern kings. Jon Snow stood calm, dark curls falling slightly over his face, his expression honest and steady. He did not beg. He did not flatter. He simply believed in what was right. Robb Stark stood taller, younger, but fierce, the Wolf King who had already tasted war and betrayal. There was pain in his eyes, but also fire. They were different men, but they carried the same northern blood, loyal, stubborn, and true. "I did not come all this way to be ruled by fear," Daenerys said slowly, interrupting Tyrion. Her silver hair shimmered in the candlelight. "I came to break the wheel." Tyrion paused. "Your Grace, no one is speaking of fear. We are speaking of strategy." Jon stepped forward slightly. "Strategy without trust is just another cage," he said quietly. The room fell silent. Daenerys looked at him, really looked at him. This was not a man trying to control her. This was a man who had died for his people and come back. A man who bent the knee not because he was weak, but because he believed in something bigger than pride. "And what would you have me do?" she asked him. Jon did not hesitate. "Trust the North. Trust the living. The Night King does not care about thrones or titles. If we do not stand together fully, there will be nothing left to rule." Robb crossed his arms. "And when the dead are gone, we can speak of crowns. But right now, my people are freezing and starving, while your dragons sit on stone." The words were bold. Tyrion inhaled sharply, expecting anger. But instead of fury, Daenerys felt something else. Clarity. Her council had been whispering cautions since she arrived in Westeros. "Do not trust the Starks. The North is stubborn. The North is ungrateful." But these two men were not playing games. They were not plotting behind smiles. They were speaking truth straight to her face, and Daenerys Targaryen had always respected strength. She walked around the table slowly, her boots echoing softly. She stopped in front of Jon and Robb. "You both ask for trust," she said. "But what do you offer in return?" Jon met her eyes. "My sword, my name, and my word." Robb nodded. "The North does not forget its debts. Stand with us now, and we will stand with you when the Southern Lords try to tear you apart." For a moment she thought of Missandei's gentle voice, of Grey Worm's loyalty, of the people in Meereen who had called her Mysa. She had always believed she could feel when someone was lying. These two were not. Behind her, Tyrion spoke carefully. "Your Grace, emotions are dangerous in war." She turned slowly to face him, and so is fear disguised as wisdom. Varys shifted uncomfortably. Daenerys made her decision. "Very well," she said firmly. "From this moment we fight as one army. The dragons will fly north tomorrow. Food from Dragonstone will be sent to Winterfell immediately. And when the dead are defeated," she looked back at Jon and Robb, "we will decide the future of Westeros together." Shock filled the room. Tyrion's mouth opened slightly, but he said nothing. Robb gave a short nod of respect. "You won't regret this." Jon simply said, "Thank you." But trust was not so simple. Later that night, Daenerys stood alone on the cliffs of Dragonstone, watching Drogon circle in the dark sky. The wind was cold, almost like the North had already reached her. She heard footsteps behind her. "You chose them over your own hand," Tyrion's voice said gently. She did not turn. "I chose unity. And if they betray you," she finally looked at him, "then I will burn them. But I would rather risk betrayal than rule alone." Far away in King's Landing, Cersei Lannister received word that dragons were flying north instead of south. A slow smile spread across her face. "Let them fight the dead," she whispered, holding her wineglass. "When they are weak, we will finish what the Mad King started." the game had changed. In the north, ravens arrived before the dragons. The people of Winterfell gathered as Robb read Daenerys' message aloud. Food, soldiers, dragons, all coming to stand with them. For the first time since the White Walkers crossed the wall, hope spread through the cold air. But not everyone was pleased. Sansa Stark stood at the edge of the crowd, her face calm but her mind racing. Trusting a Targaryen had never ended well for her family, and in the shadows of the God's Wood, Bran Stark watched the future with silent, distant eyes. War was coming, and this time the fate of the Seven Kingdoms would depend on whether a dragon, a wolf, and a king could truly trust each other. The sky above Winterfell turned dark the morning the dragons arrived. People ran out of their homes, pointing at the clouds as a massive shadow passed over the castle walls. Children screamed, horses panicked, even the bravest northern soldiers tightened their grip on their swords. Then they saw them. Drogon and Rhaegal cut through the cold air like living storms. Their wings were wide enough to block the sun. Fire glowed deep in their throats, lighting up the grey sky, and behind them rode Daenerys Targaryen, her silver hair flying like a banner of war. Jon Snow stood beside Robb Stark on the battlements. Neither flinched. "She kept her word," Robb said quietly. Jon nodded, but his eyes were thoughtful. "Let's hope the North keeps ours." The dragons landed outside the gates, shaking the earth beneath them. Snow rose into the air as their claws touched ground. Unsullied soldiers marched behind them in perfect formation. The Dothraki riders circled like wolves around prey, their braids swinging in the wind. The North had never seen such power. The gates of Winterfell opened slowly. Robb walked forward first, Jon beside him. Daenerys dismounted from Drogon, her boots crunching on the snow. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. No kneeling, no bowing. Just three leaders standing as equals. "You came," Robb said. "I said I would," Daenerys replied. Jon stepped closer. "The Night King is moving faster than we thought. Our scouts say the dead are only days away." Daenerys' jaw tightened. "Then, we will not waste time." Inside the great hall of Winterfell, a new war council gathered, but this time it was different. Tyrion still spoke, but not as the only voice. Varys still listened, but he was no longer guiding the room from the shadows. Now Jon and Robb stood beside Daenerys at the center table. A map of the north lay before them. "We fortify the outer trenches with dragon glass," Jon said, pointing. "The dragons stay behind the castle until the Night King reveals himself." Robb shook his head slightly. "No. If we wait, fear will spread. The dragons should strike first. Burn as many as possible before they reach the walls." Tyrion frowned. "Dragons in the dark are vulnerable." Daenerys looked between them. In another world she might have dismissed Robb's boldness or Jon's caution, but now she listened carefully. "Both of you are right," she said slowly. "We burn their numbers early. But the moment the Night King shows himself, we strike together." Jon met her eyes. There was something unspoken there. Understanding, trust. But outside the hall, whispers were growing. The northern lords were not comfortable. "She brings foreign soldiers to our lands," one muttered. "And dragons," another said bitterly. "Fire and blood." Sansa Stark stood with folded hands, listening to every word. When Daenerys entered the courtyard later, Sansa approached her alone. "You're risking everything for my brother," Sansa said calmly. "For all of you," Daenerys replied. Sansa's eyes were sharp. "Trust is fragile in the north. My father trusted once. My brother trusted once." Her voice lowered. "Both died for it." Daenerys felt the sting in those words. "And what would you have me do? Rule through fear?" Sansa did not answer immediately. "I would have you prove that your loyalty is not temporary." Before Daenerys could respond, a horn echoed from the distance. 3 long blasts. Jon froze. Robb's hand went to his sword. "The dead," Jon whispered. The ground began to tremble faintly. Men rushed to the walls. Women and children were pulled inside. The Unsullied locked shields into formation without panic. Dothraki riders prepared their araks. Northern soldiers dipped weapons into barrels of oil and dragonglass. Snow began to fall heavily. From the tree line beyond Winterfell, shapes started to move. Thousands, silent, endless. The army of the dead had arrived sooner than expected. On the walls, Jon turned to Daenerys. "This is it." She climbed onto Drogon without hesitation. "Then let's show them what trust looks like." Robb mounted his horse, raising his sword high. "For the North, for the living," Jon shouted. The gates of Winterfell remained closed, but the world outside erupted into chaos. The dragons roared, flames lighting up the dark sky. Fire crashed into the front lines of the dead, turning hundreds into ash. The Night King's army kept walking forward through the burning remains of their own. Robb led the first charge from the side gates, striking at the edges of the undead forces. Jon fought at the front lines, his blade cutting through white flesh and frozen bone. Above them, Daenerys and her dragons burned wave after wave. For a moment it seemed possible. For a moment, unity felt stronger than death. But then the temperature dropped suddenly. The fire dimmed, and from the heart of the storm, riding a dead dragon with blue burning eyes, the Night King appeared. Daenerys' breath caught. Jon stared upward. Robb felt the hope shift into something colder. The real battle had just begun. The sky cracked with ice and fire. The Night King rode the undead dragon high above Winterfell, its blue flames cutting through the night like frozen lightning. Drogon roared in anger, and Daenerys pulled the reins hard, sending him straight into the sky. "Dracarys!" she screamed. A blast of red fire shot toward the Night King, lighting up the battlefield below. Soldiers stopped fighting for a second just to look up. Fire met blue flame mid-air, exploding into sparks that fell like deadly snow. Jon hacked through two whites before looking up. His heart pounded. "Bran," he whispered to himself. The Night King was here for his brother. On the western flank, Robb Stark fought like the wolf he was named after. His sword rose and fell, cutting through the dead with brutal strength. But they kept coming. Every fallen soldier, northern or unsullied, risked rising again. "Fall back to the trenches," Robb shouted. The Unsullied retreated in perfect order, protecting the flanks. Dothraki riders circled back, fewer than before. The first line of fire trenches was lit, creating a wall of flames between Winterfell and the undead army. For a moment, the dead stopped. The fire held them back, but then the Night King lifted his hand slowly. Jon saw it from below. No, the fallen bodies began to shake. Dead soldiers, burned and broken, started rising again. Even those inside the castle walls began to move. Screams filled the air as corpses attacked from within. Inside Winterfell's crypts, fear exploded. Sansa Stark held a dagger tightly as the stone tombs cracked open. The dead Starks, buried for generations, clawed their way out. In the courtyard, Tyrion and Varys fought back to back, terror on their faces. "This was not in the plan," Tyrion shouted. "Plans rarely survive," Varys replied, stabbing wildly. Above, the dragons clashed. Drogon's jaws snapped at the undead dragon's neck, tearing frozen flesh. Rhaegal joined the fight, biting into its wing. The sky became a violent storm of scales and claws. Daenerys spotted the Night King holding on calmly, untouched by the chaos. She dove straight toward him. But before she could reach him, the undead dragon slammed into Drogon's side. The impact shook her violently. She nearly fell. On the ground, Jon saw Drogon stagger. Without thinking, he began running toward the Godswood. If the Night King reached Bran, a wave of whites crashed into him, dragging him down. Jon struggled, stabbing blindly. Hands clawed at his armor, pulling him into the snow. "Jon!" Robb's voice roared. Robb cut his way through the swarm, reaching his brother. Together they fought back to back, breathing heavily. "We can't win like this," Robb yelled. Jon's eyes were wild. "We don't need to win the army, we need to kill him." As if hearing those words, a massive shadow fell over them. The undead dragon crashed into the courtyard, destroying part of the wall. ice fire blasted across the battlements. Daenerys screamed as Drogon was forced down. The Night King dismounted slowly. The battlefield grew strangely quiet around him. He walked forward through fire that did not burn him, through chaos that did not touch him. His blue eyes locked onto the godswood. Bran Stark waited beneath the weirwood tree, calm and distant. Theon Greyjoy stood before him with a small group of Ironborn. Fear was in Theon's eyes, but he did not run. Back in the courtyard, Jon tried to reach the godswood, but a wall of undead blocked him. Robb grabbed his arm. Together! They charged side by side, cutting through anything that stood in their path. For the first time since childhood, they fought as true brothers again. Daenerys climbed off Drogon, picking up a fallen sword. She saw the Night King walking calmly toward Bran. Rage filled her chest. She ran. Arrows bounced harmlessly off the Night King's armor as he approached the weirwood tree. Theon, charged with the crime, was cut down in a single cold strike. Bran did not move. The Night King raised his icy blade. And then, a blur shot from the shadows. Arya Stark. She leaped through the air, dagger aimed for his chest. The Night King caught her by the throat. Time seemed to stop. Jon screamed. Robb froze. Daenerys felt her heart drop, but Arya dropped the dagger from one hand to the other, just like she had practiced, and drove it straight into the Night King's chest. The sound was like cracking ice across a frozen lake. The Night King's eyes widened slightly. Then he shattered. Every wight on the battlefield collapsed instantly. The undead dragon broke apart into pieces of ice. Silence fell heavy over Winterfell. Snow continued to fall gently. Jon dropped to his knees, breathing hard. Robb stared in disbelief. Daenerys stood frozen, watching the pieces of their enemy scatter like dust in the wind. They had survived. Not because of fear, not because of Veer, not because of one ruler, but because they trusted each other enough to stand together. And as the first light of dawn touched the walls of Winterfell, a new truth settled over them all. The war for the living was over, but the war for the throne was only beginning. Dawn came slowly over Winterfell, pale and cold, as if the world itself was tired of watching men fight for power. Smoke still rose from the broken walls. Bodies of the dead and the living covered the snow. The air smelled of ash and blood. They had won. But victory did not feel like joy. Jon Snow stood in the courtyard, staring at the place where the Night King had shattered. Arya was alive. Bran was alive. Bran was alive. Robb was alive. Daenerys was alive. But so many others were not. Jorah Mormont's body lay near the gates, his armor blackened. Lyanna Mormont's small form rested beside giants she had helped kill. The North had paid in blood. Daenerys walked through the aftermath silently. The people looked at her differently now, not with fear, not exactly with love either. Something else. Respect. She had come north when she could have attacked King's Landing. She had risked her dragons for a land that did not yet call her queen. Robb approached her as soldiers carried the wounded inside. "You saved thousands," he said simply. She shook her head. "We saved thousands." Jon joined them, snow melting in his hair. There was something heavy in his eyes, something he had been holding back. "The dead are gone," Jon said. "But Cersei is still on the throne." The name hung in the cold air like poison. Far to the south, in the Red Keep of King's Landing, Cersei Lannister stood by a window, watching ships gather in Blackwater Bay. News had arrived. The North had survived. Her smile faded. "So," she said quietly, turning to Qyburn, "they did not die for me." "No, Your Grace," Qyburn replied. "They are stronger now. United." Cersei's eyes hardened. "Then we will break that unity." Back in Winterfell, a funeral pyre stretched across the field outside the castle. Thousands stood in silence as torches were lit. Flames rose high into the grey sky, carrying the fallen into smoke and memory. Daenerys watched the fire reflect in Jon's eyes. "You're thinking," she said softly. Jon nodded. "The North will follow Robb. The Unsullied follow you. The Dothraki follow strength. When we march south, what happens then? She studied him carefully. We agreed. After the war with the dead, we decide together. Robb stepped closer, having heard the last words. And we will. But we must be honest now. The lords of Westeros will not accept a foreign queen easily. Daenerys felt the old anger stir inside her, but she controlled it. I am not foreign, she said calmly. My family ruled for 300 years and burned those who disagreed, Sansa's voice cut in sharply. The three turned. Sansa stood tall, her red hair moving in the wind. The North remembers, she added. Tension thickened. But instead of fire, Daenerys took a breath. Then help me make them remember something new. Silence followed. Robb looked between them. Cersei expects us to turn on each other. That's her only hope. Jon finally spoke the truth he had been hiding. There's something else she could use against us. Both Daenerys and Robb looked at him. Jon's jaw tightened. I am not Ned Stark's son. Daenerys' eyes narrowed slightly. I am Aegon Targaryen, Jon continued, son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. The world seemed to stop. Robb stared at him, shock breaking across his face. That's not possible. Bran's voice echoed from behind them as he rolled forward in his chair. It is. Daenerys felt the ground shift beneath her. Another Targaryen, a male heir, a stronger claim. For a brief second, old instincts whispered, threat. That she looked at Jon not as a rival, but as the man who had fought beside her, trusted her, saved her. You knew, she asked quietly. Jon nodded. I didn't want it. I still don't. Robb stepped back slowly, trying to understand. You're my cousin? And your king? Sansa asked sharply. No, Jon said firmly. I bent the knee. I meant it. All eyes turned to Daenerys. This was the moment. The same kind of moment that had destroyed her father. The same kind that could destroy her now. She could demand silence. She could see him as a rival. She could let fear guide her. Instead, she stepped forward. You are a Targaryen, she said to Jon. And you are also a Stark. That makes you the bridge between fire and ice. The others watched closely. If the people discover this, Tyrion said carefully, many may prefer him. Daenerys nodded slightly. Then we will not hide it. Gasps spread. Robb stared. You would risk that. You would risk that. I trusted you both before I knew this truth, she said. Why would I stop now? Jon looked at her, almost stunned. You would share power? She held his gaze. I would break the wheel, not replace it. Outside the walls, ravens flew south carrying messages of unity. But in King's Landing, Cersei received different whispers, rumors of a Targaryen heir in the north. She crushed a goblet in her hand. Let them trust each other, she hissed. Trust is easy to poison. And far across the narrow sea, the Iron Bank began placing quiet bets on which dragon would burn first. The real game for the throne had begun, not with swords, but with doubt, and doubt was far more dangerous than the dead. The news spread through Winterfell like wildfire in dry grass. Jon Snow was not just a Stark, he was Aegon Targaryen. At first, it was only whispers between lords. Then it became open conversation in the Great Hall. Some northern bannermen looked proud. Their king had royal blood from both fire and ice. Others looked worried. Targaryen blood had brought madness before. Daenerys could feel the shift in the air. It was small, subtle, but it was there. She stood on the battlements one evening, watching the last snow melt from the fields. Drogon rested behind her, his massive body rising and falling with slow breaths. Footsteps approached. Robb Stark joined her. They're talking, he said honestly. I know, she replied without turning. They don't doubt your strength. They saw what you did in battle. But Westeros has always followed bloodlines. Daenerys finally faced him. And what do you follow, Robb Stark? Blood or trust? He didn't answer immediately. I follow the North, he said at last. and the North follows loyalty. Jon has both." There was no insult in his voice, just truth. Daenerys nodded slowly. "So do I." Before Robb could respond, a horn sounded at the gates. A rider approached under a white flag. In the courtyard, Jon, Sansa, Tyrion, and the others gathered as the Lannister messenger was brought forward. His armor bore the lion of Casterly Rock. He knelt stiffly. "Queen Cersei Lannister sends her congratulations on your victory against the dead," he announced. "And she sends a proposal." Tyrion's jaw tightened. The messenger continued. "If the North recognizes Cersei as the rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms, she will recognize Northern independence under King Robb Stark." Murmurs exploded around the courtyard. Sansa's eyes narrowed. Robb's face darkened. "And what of me?" Daenerys asked calmly. The messenger swallowed. "Queen Cersei does not recognize foreign invaders or dragon queens." Silence fell heavy. Jon stepped forward slightly, his voice cold. "And what of me?" The messenger hesitated. "There are rumors. Queen Cersei invites Lord Aegon Targaryen to King's Landing to discuss his claim." Now the courtyard erupted. It was clear what Cersei was doing. Divide them. Offer the North freedom. Offer Jon legitimacy. Remove Daenerys from the board without lifting a sword. Tyrion stepped closer to Daenerys and whispered, "This is clever. Dangerous." Robb walked up to the messenger, fury barely contained. "Tell your queen this. The North does not kneel to threats wrapped in silk." The messenger stiffened. "Is that your final answer?" Jon looked at Daenerys before speaking. That small look did not go unnoticed. Cersei had planted the seed perfectly. Daenerys felt every eye on her. If she spoke with anger, they would see jealousy. If she stayed silent, they would see weakness. She stepped forward. "Tell Cersei Lannister," Daenerys said clearly, "that we march south together, wolves and dragons, and when we arrive, she can discuss her surrender." The messenger paled. "You would refuse peace?" he asked. "This is not peace," Tyrion cut in sharply. "This is manipulation." The messenger was escorted out. When the gates closed, the tension remained. Inside the great hall that night, the argument finally broke open. "She's trying to use me," Jon said. "And it's working," Sansa replied. "Even if you refuse, the idea exists now." Robb slammed his hand on the table. "We cannot let her split us before we even reach King's Landing." Varys spoke softly from the shadows. "The people will hear of Jon's claim. Many lords in the south may prefer him over Daenerys." Daenerys looked at him sharply. "And you? What do you prefer?" Varys held her gaze. "I prefer the realm." The words were careful. Too careful. Jon stood up suddenly. "I don't want the throne." "Wanting has never mattered," Sansa said quietly. The room felt smaller. War against the dead had been simple compared to this. Daenerys rose slowly. "I will not fight you," she said to Jon. "Not for a chair made of swords." Robb looked between them. "Then what do we do?" Daenerys' voice became steady, strong. "We move before Cersei can spread more lies. We take King's Landing quickly. No long siege. No starving children. We strike hard and end it." Tyrion frowned. "A direct assault will cost lives." "So will waiting," Robb replied. Jon looked at Daenerys carefully. "And if the city refuses to open its gates?" She met his eyes. "Then we make sure Cersei understands that this is her last chance to protect her people." There was fire in her voice, but not madness, control. Outside, snow finally stopped falling over Winterfell. Inside the Red Keep, Cersei smiled as more ravens arrived. Rumors were spreading exactly as she hoped. Some southern lords were already whispering a male Targaryen heir would be more stable, more traditional. The game was working. But Cersei underestimated one thing. This time, the dragon and the wolf were not enemies. They were learning how to hunt together. And when they marched south, Westeros would not face a divided army. It would face something far more dangerous. Unity. The army left Winterfell under a grey sky, but this time it did not feel like a desperate march toward death. It felt like purpose. Wolves and dragons moved together. The unsullied marched in perfect lines. The Dothraki rode along the flanks like shadows ready to strike. Northern banners with the direwolf sigil waved beside the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen. For the first time in generations, the realm was seeing something it had never seen before: true unity. Jon rode beside Daenerys at the front. Robb commanded the northern forces just behind them. From a distance, it looked powerful. Up close, it felt fragile. Scouts returned on the third day with troubling news. "The Golden Company has arrived in King's Landing," one scout reported. "Thousands of sellswords, war elephants, the city gates are fortified, and the Iron Fleet blocks Blackwater Bay." Tyrion's face tightened at the mention of the fleet. "You're Greyjoy," he muttered bitterly. Daenerys looked ahead calmly. "Cersei has gathered everything she can." Robb gave a short nod. "Good. That means when she falls, there will be no second war." But Cersei was not waiting behind her walls quietly. As the united army crossed the Trident, another rider approached, not from King's Landing this time, but from the Southlands. The banner carried a crowned stag. "From Storm's End," the messenger said, once brought forward. "Many houses of the Stormlands are willing to support King Aegon Targaryen." The words hung heavy again. Not Queen Daenerys. King Aegon. Jon closed his eyes briefly. Robb looked ready to break the messenger's jaw, but Daenerys did something unexpected. "Bring the lords to us," she said calmly. "All of them." That night, several Storm Lords stood in her camp studying Jon carefully. "You carry the name of Rhaegar," one said. "The realm respected him." Jon shook his head. "The realm rebelled against him." "That was your father," another lord corrected gently. "Not you." Tyrion watched Daenerys closely, searching for signs of anger. But she remained seated, composed, listening. One of the Storm Lords turned to her. "If the two of you are united, perhaps the realm could accept a marriage. Fire and ice together." The suggestion was bold. Silence filled the tent. Jon looked uncomfortable. Robb's eyes narrowed slightly. Sansa, standing at the back, watched Daenerys carefully. This was another trap, but softer, more tempting. Daenerys finally spoke. "This war is not about marriage," she said evenly. "It is about ending a tyrant who starves her people while hiding behind walls." The Stormlords exchanged looks. Jon added firmly, "I've already bent the knee." One lord tilted his head. "Knees can rise." The tension thickened. Robb stepped forward, his voice cold. "The North does not break its word." The meeting ended without full commitment. But doubt had again been planted. Later that night, Jon found Daenerys standing alone near the edge of camp, staring into the firelight. "They will keep pushing," he said quietly. "Yes," she replied. "You could secure everything with one decision." She looked at him. "Marriage." He didn't answer, but his silence spoke. For a moment, the idea hung between them, not political, but personal. They had fought together, bled together, trusted each other when it mattered most. But Daenerys shook her head slightly. "I will not bind you to me to silence rumors," she said. "That would not be trust. That would be control." Jon studied her face carefully. "You're stronger than they think, and you're more dangerous than you realize," she replied softly. Before he could respond, a horn blasted from the southern scouts. 3 sharp calls. Robb rushed toward them. "What is it?" The scout's face was pale. "King's Landing is burning." Everyone froze. "What?" Tyrion demanded. "Wildfire explosions near the outer districts," the scout continued. "Civilians are fleeing the city. The Golden Company is moving inside the walls." Daenerys' eyes widened slightly. "She's doing it," Tyrion whispered in horror. "She's creating chaos before we even arrive." Robb's jaw clenched. "Why burn her own city?" "To blame us," Varys said quietly. "If King's Landing burns before we attack, she will tell the realm it was dragonfire." Daenerys felt cold fury settle inside her. Not wild, not reckless, but focused. She would sacrifice her own people just to win the story. Jon looked south, anger building. "Then we move faster." "No," Daenerys said sharply. They all looked at her. If we rush blindly, we play into her hands. We approach carefully. I will fly ahead with Drogon at dawn, not to burn, but to see. Tyrion looked nervous. It could be a trap. Everything is a trap, she replied calmly. The difference is whether we walk into it together. Robb nodded slowly. Then we move as one. Far in the distance, smoke darkened the southern sky. Cersei Lannister stood on the balcony of the Red Keep, watching controlled explosions light parts of her own city. Small sections only, enough to create fear. They will think the Dragon Queen grows impatient, she said softly, sipping wine. Qyburn bowed his head, and when she arrives to defend herself, Cersei smiled. Then the people will already hate her. But she had miscalculated one thing. This Daenerys was not alone, and when dawn came, a dragon would fly. Not to destroy it blindly, but to expose the lie. The final moo was coming, and this time Cersei might have lit a fire she could not control. Dawn broke red over the horizon, the sky stained with smoke from King's Landing. Daenerys mounted Drogon as the army prepared below. Jon stood beside her before she took flight. "If it's a trap, don't be a hero," he said quietly. A small smile touched her lips. "I'm not the hero. I'm the dragon." With that, Drogon leapt into the air, wings cutting through the wind. The ground disappeared beneath her as she flew south alone. As she approached King's Landing, the smell of wildfire hit her first, sharp, bitter, unnatural. Smoke rose from several districts near the outer walls. Buildings burned, but not from dragon fire. The pattern was wrong. Too controlled, too placed. She circled higher. Below, chaos ruled the streets. People screamed and ran. Gold cloaks shouted orders. And near the gates, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Large barrels, hidden beneath wagons, wildfire. Cersei had planted it across the city. Daenerys' jaw tightened. If she attacked carelessly, one spark could turn the entire capital into a green inferno. Tens of thousands would die, and Cersei would blame her. From the Red Keep balcony, Cersei watched Drogon circle above like a dark star. "Come on," Cersei whispered. "Burn them." But the flames did not fall. Instead, Drogon roared, loud and long, drawing every eye in the city upward. Daenerys turned him toward Blackwater Bay. There, Euron Greyjoy's Iron Fleet waited with massive scorpions aimed at the sky. The first bolt launched. Drogon twisted sharply. The bolt missed by inches. Another flew. This one grazed his wing. Daenerys felt his pain and rage. "Up," she commanded. They climbed into the clouds. Below, Euron laughed, thinking she was retreating. He was wrong. Moments later, Drogon burst down from the sun itself, blinding the fleet. This time, Daenerys did not aim at the city. She aimed at the ships. Dracarys. Fire exploded across the water. Ships burned fast, sails turning to ash. Scorpions melted before they could reload. The bay became a floating graveyard. Euron screamed orders, but it was too late. His fleet shattered in minutes. From the walls of King's Landing, soldiers watched in fear. "She's not burning the city," one gold cloak muttered. "No," another whispered. "She's burning our protection." Inside the Red Keep, Cersei's smile faded. Meanwhile, Jon and Robb led the united army to the outskirts of the capital. Smoke rose ahead, but they saw no dragon fire touching homes. "She's targeting the fleet," Robb said, impressed. Tyrion allowed himself a small breath of relief. "She's proving Cersei wrong." The Golden Company marched out from the gates to meet them on the open field. Thousands of disciplined sellswords stood in shining armor, elephants behind them. Jon drew his sword. No turning back. Robb raised his blade high. For the north. The battle began with thunder. Dothraki cavalry slammed into the flanks. Unsullied shields locked tight against the Golden Company's charge. Northern archers rained arrows down in dark waves. The sellswords were strong, but they were fighting for gold. The northern soldiers were fighting for home. Above, Drogon returned from the bay, circling behind the enemy lines. Daenerys saw the wildfire wagons positioned near the gates. If the Golden Company retreated through them, one explosion could ignite the city. She made her decision. Instead of burning the soldiers, she burned the wildfire. Precise. Controlled. One wagon at a time, green flames erupted outside the walls far from civilians. The hidden trap was exposed before it could be used. On the battlefield, Golden Company captains realized too late that their queen's final weapon was gone. Robb broke through their center line with brutal force. Jon cut down their commander in single combat. The elephants panicked and fled. Within an hour, the Golden Company collapsed. The Lannister soldiers on the walls looked down at the defeated army, and then at the dragon hovering above them, not burning their homes. One by one, swords began to fall from trembling hands. Inside the Red Keep, Cersei paced furiously. She was supposed to take the bait. She screamed. Qyburn bowed nervously. "Your Grace, the people are opening the gates." "What?" A guard rushed in. "The city watch is surrendering." Cersei's face twisted with rage. She had wanted Daenerys to become the Mad Queen. Instead, she had become something worse, a just one. Outside the gates, the bells of King's Landing began to ring. Surrender. Jon looked up at the sound. Robb exhaled heavily. Daenerys landed Drogon just outside the broken Golden Company lines. The gates slowly creaked open. The capital was theirs. But high in the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister was not done yet, and desperate queens were always the most dangerous. The bells of King's Landing rang again and again, their sound echoing through smoke and fear. Surrender. Lannister soldiers dropped their swords. The city watch opened the gates fully. Civilians slowly stepped out from hiding, staring at the dragon resting outside their walls, confused, afraid, but alive. Daenerys sat on Drogon's back, watching everything carefully. No fire, no screams, no madness. Just victory. Jon and Robb rode through the gates with the Northern Army behind them. Unsullied marched in perfect order. There was no looting, no chaos. Discipline held firm. For the first time in years, King's Landing had fallen without being destroyed. But inside the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister stood in her throne room, staring at the Iron Throne. "I will not be paraded," she said quietly. Qyburn stood nearby, pale and shaking. "Your Grace, we can still escape through the tunnels." "No." Her voice was calm now, too calm. Below the castle, hidden deep in the foundation, the last and largest wildfire cache waited, enough to destroy the Red Keep, enough to kill everyone inside, invaders and loyalists alike. "If I cannot rule," Cersei whispered, "no one will." Outside the throne room doors, footsteps approached. Heavy, confident. The mountain stood guard, silent as death itself. The mountain stood guard, silent as death itself. Jaime Lannister burst through the doors, wounded but alive. Cersei's eyes widened. "You came back. I came to stop you," Jaime said, breathless. She studied his face carefully. "You always choose others over me." "I'm choosing the city," he replied. For a moment, old love and old hatred battled in her eyes. "You think they'll show mercy?" she asked. "The Dragon Queen," Jaime stepped closer. "She already has. You steam. She already has." Far below, Daenerys, Jon, and Robb entered the Red Keep together. The halls were empty. Guards had fled or surrendered. "It's too quiet," Robb muttered. Tyrion rushed forward from behind them. "The wildfire beneath the city." Before he could finish, the ground trembled faintly. Daenerys felt it instantly. "Drogon," she whispered under her breath. High above, Drogon roared in warning. Jon looked at her sharply. "She's going to burn it." They ran. Inside the throne room, Jaime stood between Cersei and the hidden lever. "Move!" she demanded. "Move!" she demanded. "No!" Tears filled her eyes, but her voice stayed cold. "You would betray me. I would save you from yourself." For a split second, something human flickered in her expression. Then rage returned. She reached for the lever, and Jaime grabbed her wrist. "Tiles!" The mountain stepped forward to intervene, but before he could move, a sword pierced through his armor from behind. "Sandor Clegane." "No more monsters," he growled. The mountain fell with a heavy crash. Cersei screamed in fury and desperation. At that moment, the throne room doors burst open. Jon, Robb, and Daenerys entered. Everything froze. Cersei looked at Daenerys, expecting fire, madness, revenge. Instead, Daenerys walked forward slowly. "It's over," she said. Cersei laughed bitterly. "You think you've won? They will never love you." "I don't need love," Daenerys replied calmly. "I need peace." Cersei's hand twitched again toward the lever. Jaime tightened his grip. "Don't," he whispered to her. For a long, heavy moment, the world held its breath. Then Cersei's strength left her. Her hand fell. Guards rushed forward and seized her. The wildfire beneath the city remained untouched. King's Landing was saved, not by fire, not by fear, but by restraint. Days later, the throne room looked different. The Iron Throne still stood, sharp and cold. Daenerys walked toward it slowly. Jon and Robb stood beside her. The realm waited outside. She placed her hand on the cold metal and then turned away. Gasps filled the hall. "This throne was built from fear," she said clearly, "and fear is the wheel." She looked at Jon, then at Robb. "Westeros will not have one ruler," she declared. "The North will remain free under King Robb Stark." Robb bowed his head slightly in respect. She continued, "The southern kingdoms will choose their ruler through council, lords and ladies together." Murmurs of shock and disbelief spread. "And you?" Tyrion asked carefully. Daenerys smiled faintly. "I will rule as Queen of Dragonstone and protector of the realm, not above it." Jon stepped forward. "And I will serve, not as king, but as bridge between houses." The wheel was not just broken, it was reshaped. Outside, the people of King's Landing gathered as Cersei was led away in chains. No execution, no spectacle, justice, not vengeance. Months later, the realm began to change. The North rebuilt stronger than ever. The capital slowly healed. Dragons flew across peaceful skies instead of battlefields. And the story of that war was told not as the tale of a mad queen, but as the moment a dragon chose trust over fear. Because in the end, the greatest power was not fire, it was unity. And this time, the Game of Thrones ended not with ashes, but with hope.